astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up. But you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start my own nation with myself from reservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with myself from reservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And hello, everybody. Hello, Leanne. You're the only one on the chat stream at the moment. So welcome. We'll talk just for you and nobody else. So for the benefit of the podcast, I am just delighted today to welcome Vonnie to our team. Thank you for joining us, Vonnie. It's lovely to see you. Love the hair, by the way. Am I allowed to say I love the hair?
You are allowed to say you love the hair. It's looking a bit fluffy now.
Absolutely brilliant. And Neil Terry, hello again.
Hello.
Becoming a regular, Neil. I love the Karl Marx beard. It's getting fuller and bigger as we go on. It's sort of just fabulous.
I will find that razor one day.
No, don't. We'll all have a nervous breakdown.
I'm inspired by you, John. That's what it is.
This Santa Claus. It needs trimming back. And Paul, welcome, the boss. Great to see you again, Paul. Thank you. Right,
am I not looking good?
What? Are you not looking good?
Everyone else had lovely comments about their hair and their beard and things like that. I'm feeling all left out.
That calling you the boss would be sufficient to flatter your ego, but clearly not. No, Paul, you're looking so smart and handsome, and sort of suddenly a whole load of ladies are joining the chat stream. Clearly inspired by your presence on screen. Hello,
probably
everybody.
more here for Vonnie, to be fair.
Welcome, everybody, and off we go. I don't know who to choose first. Fanny, moment of your week.
Oh, this is a really strange one. So anyone who knows me knows I'm a massive fan of RuPaul's Drag Race. So one of my favourite queens from RuPaul's Drag Race is Davina De Campo, who's from Yorkshire and is a proper socialist. And they have sent us a solidarity message, which I'm going to share at the rally tomorrow for the strike. So I'm so excited. Needless to say, it's very left-wing, it's very on point, and it's very supportive of teachers. I mean, I met them at our NEU LGBT plus conference the back end of last year. They're absolute delight. So,
well, what's the name of the drag queen from Ferry Hill who was so wonderful? What's her name?
Testicle.
Testicle, that's right. Sort of just fabulous, deeply good person. It's wonderful. So congratulations on that endorsement. Neil, moment of your week.
On Saturday, I photographed the Leeds Keep Our NHS public rally in Leeds, which was fantastic. They designed a new banner with Boris Johnson with a really long nose, like Pinocchio, which said, "Where's our hospitals?" And we posed outside the gates of a building site that's had no building done on it, which is supposed to be a state-of-the-art children's hospital is due to open this year. But even if they start building it this year, it won't be done until probably the back end of the decade now. And then it also followed on to join the BMA rally in Leeds, who are currently balloting for industrial action as well. So it was fantastic.
But were you there in your professional capacity as a photographer?
Yeah, but I'd have been there. I'd have been there even without a camera, to be honest, because I've got to say, Leeds keep our NHS public rallies. When they do their rallies, they're brilliant. They really are.
Fabulous. I'll be asking you whether you'll be out tomorrow later on. And Paul, moment of your week.
I got blocked by County Durham Labour on Facebook, so it was quite funny. So yeah, it's funny how these things spiral out of control. So what it was is there was a post by the County Durham Labour group of councillors saying we fully support Alan Strickland and something like a photo with him, and he's the candidate for Sedgefield for the Labour Party. So I politely asked what their opinion was on the Haringey development vehicle, and shared a video on what the Haringey development vehicle was, which was an attempted giveaway of public assets to the value of £2 billion by the Labour Council, whose housing minister at the time was Alan Strickland. And they deleted the comment. So I replied again and said, why did you delete my comment, with a screenshot of the comment that I'd done and a link to the video. And then they deleted the comment, and then other people started saying, why are you deleting Paul's comment, with screenshots of the video. And it happened for a couple of minutes, and then after a while, comments were disabled and I was blocked. So I was thinking, it's interesting that they don't want to answer questions about something, given the fact that I was not allowed to stand in Sedgefield because of my political judgment, apparently, but they think that his political judgment is absolutely fine, but don't want anyone to know about it.
Just protecting their candidate and failing to answer questions.
It's like, it's more than, you should be able to say, like, just own what you've done. I own everything I've ever done. I'm like, I'm fine. If I'd have tried to give away loads of public assets, which I would never do, of course, but you own it. You say why you did it, and you don't hide, and you don't expect other people to hide from you. And you can't say, I fully support this candidate, without addressing that. Yeah, no. You can't.
I think that's a key thing. And because when you try and hide these things, as people like Zahawi regularly find out, they come back to bite you in the bottom later. And it's what might have been a discussion suddenly becomes a scandal. Yes, I agree. Thank you. But to be honest, I don't think even you're surprised that you ended up being blocked. It was
badge of honour. Badge of honour. If they really don't want to engage with people,
no, they don't. They wanted rid of you all, didn't they? Yeah. Laura Lee, her moment of the week was the IMA general meeting yesterday. Began collaborative working with indie media across the UK. Too clever for me, Laura, that, but well done, absolutely. Mark's charging his batteries for tomorrow, Neil. That's good, well done. I have a moment of the week this week, and then we'll move on quickly. I bumped in today, earlier this week, to an article in the Jewish News, where they'd been talking to senior members of the Labour Party, and were reporting that they want to drop from the manifesto, the Labour manifesto, the commitment to recognise Palestine as a nation. Sort of according to the Jewish News, Keir Starmer wants a slimline manifesto which will chime with the public. And he doesn't think this will chime with the public, and so they're going to try and get rid of it. My reaction was to shove in a motion to my CLP straight away that we would not find this acceptable. And that's going to be heard tomorrow and the week after. Sort of, if you're still a member of the Labour Party, I would advise you to try and do the same thing. Yes, absolutely, Neil. What's happening in Palestine is ethnic cleansing, at least. And if you go on my Facebook, you'll every fortnight or so, I give a list of the atrocities that are happening.
Isn't it worrying that it's controversial in this country to say it's an apartheid state, whilst the UN have called it an apartheid state.
Yes.
Amnesty International have called it an apartheid state. Ireland call it an apartheid state. But if we say it in this country, it's some sort of like, oh no, Israel are beyond reproach. No country is beyond reproach. And the fact that they think that it could be considered to be anti-Semitic, the Israeli government aren't doing this because they are Jewish. They are doing it because they are a bunch of awful, awful people, in spite of being Jewish. So it's an absolutely bizarre situation where we're defending awful behaviour of people because that is somehow their awful behaviour is somehow linked to their Jewishness. I won't accept that. It's nothing to do with their Jewishness.
No, because Jewish people aren't intrinsically awful. That's the whole point. We must put this as a topic on the show because there's so much evil there to be raked over, and I could say so much, but I want to that we have three really brilliant and important topics today, listeners, and so let's move on.
I stand with Janine.
Now it's time for the big story.
And the big story today is in honour of Bonnie. So it's the tomorrow's teachers' strike. Yay! I got a message from the NEU telling me I had to go out on strike. And goodness knows how I'm going to do it, but I'll do my best. Bonnie, tell us why the teachers are going on strike tomorrow, and what are you expecting, what are you hoping will come out of tomorrow's action?
Wow, that is the biggest question in the world that we could talk about for weeks, John, as you know.
Please do.
Why? Yeah. So basically, we're going out tomorrow. We're in dispute with the Secretary of State over the fact that we are wanting an above inflation linked, fully funded pay rise for teachers. And the important bit about that is the fully funded bit.
Yes.
Yeah, because that is the bit that makes the massive difference. Schools are in a dire state. There is a crisis in education at the minute, and schools are struggling to pay the bills. They're struggling to pay the staff. They're struggling to buy basic resources. And the pay rises the government are suggesting aren't funded. They're also below inflation. And just as an aside, last time teachers had a pay rise at inflation level was 2006. My 20-year-old child was then 3. That's how long ago it was. We've had real-time falls since then. We've had years of pay caps and pay freezes at the start of the 2010 to 2014. We've had below inflation pay rises since then, which basically has left, teachers who, I think there's a stat on here, on my information here, which is how much teachers have lost who have progressed through the pay scale. So a teacher who started in 2010, which is when I started teaching, and made normal progress up this pay scale, has lost over £64,000 in real terms. When you look at it like that, and I like that stat because it links with my career, that's an immense amount of money.
Yes, it is.
It's, and we've got members who are scared to put petrol in their cars to get to work because they can't afford it. We've got members who are doing 2 or 3 jobs. We have teachers using food banks. We did ballot our support staff again on the fully funded basis, because although we don't negotiate for our support staff on a collective thing, what we can do is we can they asked us to lobby the Secretary of State to put more money in the system so they could get funded pay rises. And unfortunately, we didn't hit the threshold on that one. We did on our teacher ballot, you know, but we are still pushing for that fully funded aspect of it. Education's in massive crisis. We're not just doing it for pay. We're doing it because of that funding aspect more than anything. We have lots and lots and lots of teachers who are going out in strike for the very first time in their careers. They've never been on strike before. Certainly lots of younger teachers, because the situation is that bad. And we don't want to be on strike. We want to be in classrooms. We want to be teaching kids. We don't want this disruption, but the government spoke to us this week. There was no offer. Our General Secretary's reported that there was no movement towards even an offer or any real negotiation. And we're hoping that by...
Giovanni. I was listening to the news, and Neil Gibb was saying, and he used these words. He says, striking is not how you negotiate for pay in the modern world. I mean, how do you react to that statement?
Well, I think once you get to the point where people are taking strike action, it's because they've exhausted every other option.
Yes.
Striking workers are losing pay. You know, everyone who's out on strike tomorrow across whichever union, and there's a few of us out, is doing it without pay. They're choosing to withdraw their labour to try and put pressure on their employers, whether that be the private sector with you know, unions like the RMT, or the government with ourselves and PCS. You know,
how solid do you think that support is? How do you solid? I mean, you were saying that many of them are first-time strikers. I mean, how flaky is that support? Do you feel as you strike? I
don't think it's flaky at all. I mean, we've announced 4 days of action. I think tomorrow will be massive. I think in the northern region, our next regional date is the 28th. I think that'll be bigger, unless the government have come back to the table with something concrete. And that's what we want. We want the pressure. We want to put the pressure on to force them to talk to us properly, have meaningful discussions and meaningful negotiations. And, you know, if that doesn't work, then, you know, we're out again on budget day and the day after, you know, and that's where we've announced 2 so far. And I think every time we go out, it'll be like with the CWU. Every time they went out, it got bigger. It got bigger. They had more staff out. You know, we had, you know, and I think that support is there. I know certainly from within our networks, it's solid. We've got a lot of picket lines going on in Durham. We're having a massive rally in Durham Marketplace tomorrow with the UCU, who are also out tomorrow. Again, they're in dispute with their employers. You've got ASLEF are out tomorrow. I don't know if I've remembered everyone. There's a few.
There's a lot.
There's a lot. Yeah,
it's the biggest
PCS
strike for decades.
As well.
Sorry, Neil.
PCS are out as well.
PCS. Just like to say that they're keeping this quite quiet on the news. But the DFE civil servants are out tomorrow, and Ofsted. They're not mentioning that when they're reporting.
Oh God, Valley! Just the very time you got the chance to teach badly, and you're all out on strike.
Yeah, so there'll be no inspections because Ofsted are off as well. So yeah, we want to force them to the table, but it is striking is always a last resort, but it is the strongest.
Just one last question, very very quickly, because I want to move on to Neil. Always on the mainstream media, when teachers go out on strike, there's a big thing about the damage that you're doing to children's education. I mean, what's your reaction to that? I mean, I know what I'd say, but what do you say?
Well, there's so many arguments for that because the education has been destroyed. I'm just going to read a list out, John, if that's all right. These are all the education secretaries since 2010. There's a few, so I'll be as quick as I can. So we had Michael Gove, and since then we're living in, and I'm sorry, Paul, I'm stealing it, a post-Govian dystopia. There's Nicky Morgan, Justine Greening, Damien Hines, Gavin Williamson, Nadeem Sawahi, Michelle Donnellan, James Cleverly, Kilt Malthouse. Now we're hoping that Gillian Keegan makes a change and is the one that comes and offers us something meaningful. So yeah, we're fighting for that fully funded pay rise.
I saw her on the news. Dreadful.
Yeah, she is dreadful, but she can turn it around. She has the power to turn it around.
I'm so sorry, Neil. I want to get to you. Just sort of they were saying on the news yesterday that there's just a sniff that Gillian Keegan may have hinted that there's some give in her. I mean, do you pay any credence to that, Ronnie?
That's so we're putting the pressure on. We're hoping we can have some give there. You know, we're not doing this to hit a brick wall. We're doing it because we want them to move.
Brilliant.
We want Gillian Keegan to move. So that's what we want.
Much.
Yeah.
Neil, will you be out tomorrow with all the strikes? Where will you be? Can you tell us what's going on in your striking life? And most particularly, Neil, I want you just to pass a judgment on the strike so far. What's your feel? Because you are on the front lines regularly.
Yeah, first thing I want to say is absolute solidarity to everyone that's out on strike tomorrow. The estimated 500,000 people up and down the country that are out on strike. But but Vonnie, that is such a teacher's thing to say that Gillian Keegan, she can turn it around. But absolute solidarity to you. Yes, of course I'm out tomorrow. I'll be up bright and early. Well, I'll be out early. Yep. And I'm going to various picket lines around West Yorkshire together with my colleague on the Morning Star, Pete Lazenby, and we're going to end up one of the big rallies in Yorkshire as well as part of it, where everyone's going to come together. It's knowing where to go when there's so many picket lines is really awkward to plan. I feel a bit like a kid in a candy shop. I've gotten, I sometimes get completely baffled over where to go. My judgment over how the strikes are going, it's difficult to tell. I mean, there's generally speaking a lot of public support. But the way you can generally tell is by how the government reacts. The government aren't negotiating with anybody. I don't think they have the ability to negotiate at all. I think that the fact they're bringing in the minimum service levels for strike days, but we don't care about other days, I think speaks volumes about just how weak they are, and also the Public Order Act that they're updating in order to limit the rights of protest even further. Yes. Is also a sign of just how scared they are. But there's one thing. It's good that they're scared. They should be scared of us. They should be scared of our might. I mean, you mentioned Neil Gibb earlier on. Neil Gibb organised the Indy 130 event, Indy Labour Fest 130 event, which happened in Bradford a couple of weeks ago, which was it was all based around the strike.
Different
at
Neil.
Mills.
It's a different
chap, I think.
This is the Minister for Schools, isn't it?
Oh, sorry, I apologise. So I'm going to say that was all based around a strike that led to the creation of the Independent Labour Party. That's where I was going, but I apologise, I've got the wrong person.
I think that sort of both Neil Gibbs would be horrified at.
But I do think there's a lot of public support out there. You can tell as well when the media start to divide up workers out on strike. Yeah, there's support for nurses, but there isn't for rail workers. There's support for teachers, but there isn't for these, etc., etc. But there's one group of school staff that haven't been mentioned as part of this, and that's the support staff who sadly didn't meet the threshold for the ballot. But they do just as much hard work as what the teachers do, and they get absolutely no credit whatsoever. So it's not only solidarity to the teachers that are out tomorrow; it's solidarity to those teaching support assistants, etc., in the schools that do all that hard work to aid people's learning.
Thank you, Neil. God bless. Have a good day tomorrow.
Thank you.
I hope you get some cracking photos. Paul, the way government defeats strikes is they turn the middle class against the strikers. That's what happened in 26. That's what happened in 1985. And teachers' strikes are really bad at that because they so disrupt ordinary people's lives. They can't get to work because they can't find anybody to look after the children and things like that. And of course, that's what the government's banking on. It's banking on people turning against the strikers over time. So just to chunt on a little bit, we have to win this battle. I think if we lose this battle at this point, then you might as well say goodbye to workers' rights, because they're sort of destroying the right to protest. They're destroying the right to strike. They're driving wages down below the cost of living all the time. They're talking about modernizing jobs, which means taking away workers' rights. We're moving towards a gig economy. If we don't win this, then things are bad. What have we got to do, Paul, in your opinion, to stop that thing happening, whereby people turn against the strike, whereby what have the strikers got to do to win?
I think we need to drive the narrative. We need to tell a story around these strikes, and there can't just be so. I think the unions are doing very, very well. I think the NEU are doing very, very well at telling the story of what that is for teachers. Like, you don't want a knackered teacher teaching your child. You don't want someone who's down on their knees. You don't want you don't want the teacher visiting a food bank. Which is happening in some cases. You don't want a teacher not being able to afford to do the extra things that they do for kids, like make sure that they eat, which is not being mentioned. That comes out of teachers' own pockets sometimes when they think, actually, I'm going to buy something for that kid. Sometimes clothes, sometimes food. This happens regularly. That side of the story is told quite well. It's not broadcast far and wide, so we need to get rid of the mainstream media and just go to independent media sources and actually tell these stories and encourage people to do that, because they will drive. The billionaire-owned media will always drive their own story. But we need to link that up with a wider story as well. Now, during the pandemic, Dido Harding, for example, earned millions and millions and millions. And what was that? Was it Michelle Moon? Was that how you say her name? She earned millions and millions and millions and millions, and that is the government making up money because they can, and that's fine. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. It's where it ends up that's the problem. And it ended up in their bank accounts. If that ends up in the bank account, if that lands in the bank account of a teacher, or someone who works in schools, or support staff, whatever, or if it's in the hands of like a nurse or something like that, that will be spent in the local community. They don't take that offshore. It's not going anywhere. That money will come into your community and it will be spent, and it will make your community richer. So one way of the government making sure that your community is richer is paying the public sector more money, and then more money will go into the private sector because we'll spend it there. That story needs to be told.
How do you get that message across, Paul? How do you get that message across? How do you win that argument?
You just say what I said there. You've got to, and I think we need ordinary people saying this, because every time I say this story, every time I talk about this with my colleagues or anyone else, they go, yeah, that's right, of course, yeah, because I always spend my money locally. I spend it in my local shop, or I go and buy something nice, or go to a restaurant or something like that if I've got a bit of spare money. I don't stash it in the Cayman Islands. And like this is the reality. Do we want our public money, our public stimulus, when the government is trying to increase the stimulus in the economy? Do we want that to go to billionaires, or do we want it to go to us? We want it to go to us, clearly. And if it comes via the public sector, that money is not local businesses should be saying, pay those teachers more because I want them to come and spend in my shop. Even the greediest person in the world should want us to be paid more because it's better for them.
I want those teachers to come and have their haircut in my salon. Thank you, Paul. A couple of comments. Beth, the harsh reality is redundancy for both teachers and support staff, which means larger class sizes. And then Jane builds on this, and we need to let people know how bad things will be if teachers don't win this battle. Mark Longley is 750 billion given out during COVID, and we can't afford to pay our public service staff properly.
The interesting thing is there he mentions Gary Stevenson, who's really good, who keeps on mentioning that's like £14,000 per UK adult. Imagine if we all had actually got £14,000. that would have been spent locally, but instead it's been taken elsewhere. So that £14,000 each to spend on something, whether that's build an extension or whatever, and then that money would circulate. We need to understand that economically.
I wonder if that's connected to the fact that we're the only big economy in the world that's actually falling, because the money we're making is not going back into our economy. The money we're making is being stashed away. Vonnie, and we're running late, as always. We're running late, so this must be a very, very short comment. Last word to you.
I think, I think everything that Paul said is absolutely correct, and everything that Neil said about our support staff. Our support staff in Durham are magnificent. I'm very, very parochial about them. We have 600 and something support staff. We smashed, if we were just looking at Durham's figures, our support staff smashed that strike threshold. They are magnificent, and we are going to get the message out there for them. It has to be fully funded. That is the only way, because the first redundancies that happen will be support staff, and we know that, and we're fighting for their jobs as well. So solidarity to everyone that we are working with.
Brilliant, and solidarity with the teachers, solidarity with all the workers tomorrow. The right to strike is essential that we hang on to this. Thank you, Vonnie, for coming on and talking about that. And Mark Lungley, we need to fight for bubble up economics, not trickle down. I think you need to copyright that, Mark. It sounds bit, unless somebody else, you pinched it from somebody else. Brilliant. Okay, two more questions. First, Doncaster care homes have been in the news scandalously this week. Neil, we know that you have a really strong personal insight into this issue. So tell us what's been going on. Tell us your feelings about this, and then what do you think needs to be done to stop it?
Yeah, I'll first of all start by saying I have a personal interest in this story, because this relates to the Hesley group of schools, and in the 90s, whilst I was in care, I was placed into Hesley Hall School, which is near Wilsick Hall, known by the same people, and there was a lot of abuse there as well, and it was largely covered up. But this was some 30 odd years ago, and doesn't appear much has changed. There's been reports for quite some time about abuse taking place at Wilsick Hall School and Fullerton House School near Doncaster, which, as I said, are owned by the Hesley group of schools, and they and those reports for quite a long time being made to the LADO, which is the local authority designated officer, who's required to investigate any safeguarding concerns regarding staff, as in staff might be doing something wrong to a vulnerable child. And teachers, for example, will know what a LADO is as well. They're based in local authority, but they're part of the safeguarding hub. But also reports were made to the police. Now, it emerged this week that although Ofsted rated the school as good, there'd been numerous abuses, and there was some level of a cover-up reported in the media of this. Although how deep that cover-up is, I'm not 100% certain, so I'm not really going to dwell on that. But some of the abuses, by the way, the one bit I've forgotten is that these schools house children with complex health needs, children that are seen as being disruptive, etc., etc. So it's not like a mainstream school. It's what's referred to as a special school, which is a term I've always hated. I'm not special. I went to one of those schools. I didn't feel as I was trapped specialist, so I don't know why they're called special schools. But some of the abuse that was uncovered was, for example, one child who doesn't like loud music, doesn't like loud sounds, was placed into a kitchen with the music on full blast as a punishment, and was also threatened with being placed in the kitchen if she didn't behave herself. There was also reports of children being locked in bathrooms overnight, being locked outside at night naked, and also having vinegar rubbed in wounds, which is horrific. It's absolutely frigging galling. It really is. And if you're not angry listening to this, I don't know what the hell makes you angry. But children were also rubbing washing up liquid on their arms, and when asked why they were doing this, it was so that staff couldn't grab them. I mean, imagine how the position you'd have to be in for that. Now, this is the latest scandal, safeguarding scandal in this country, and they're happening more and more regularly. For example, I had the huge failings with Star Hobson here in Bradford. Arthur Labenio Hughes in Solihull, to name just three that have happened fairly recently, where children have died. But no one at Wilsey Hall or Fullerton House died, but still, it's an abuse scandal that took place. But the thing that really galls me about all of this is that no one is ever held to account. No one senior is ever held to account. Now, often the social workers, the care workers that have actually done the wrong things that they've done are held to account, and I'm fully behind that 100%. But for example, chief executives are never held to account. When do you last see one of them in prison for the failures that happen on their watch? They take huge salaries. For example, the salaries of both Bradford Council and Solihull chief executives are around about £200,000, give or take, and they pay that amount because they have that responsibility. But because there's no accountability, you can't have responsibility. It's the accountability that holds the responsibility, not the other way around. But yeah, when we start seeing these people being put before the courts and facing prison sentences for getting things wrong, then things will change. But until that, it'll be lessons will be learned. Well, why don't you learn the lessons when the reports are being made? Why don't you learn the lessons when people are raising those alarm bells? I mean, just today here in Bradford, the local authority has been the service. It's got even worse in Bradford since 2018. It's the worst report I've ever seen for Bradford Council, and yet Kirsten England, the chief exec, isn't actually. She's retiring in the summer rather than stepping down immediately and facing some kind of action for the failures on her watch. But there's actually a piece of legislation that holds practitioners to account. So, for example, social workers, care workers, teachers, anyone who works with vulnerable children. There's a piece of legislation called the Public Order and Courts Act 2015, which carries a maximum 5-year prison sentence and an unlimited fine if there are major failings that you've basically caused. But when you read the piece of legislation, there is nothing for anyone senior in the food chain that make the decisions that decide where these resources go, that then mean that those failures happen. They aren't held to account. It's the people lower down that always are. And until that's changed, sadly, these will keep happening more and more.
Spot on, Neil. Thank you so much for that. And your passion in this respect is just so attractive, Neil. It's really, thank you. Paul, why is this going wrong? Is it just because these are private providers, or is there something societal? What is going wrong? Neil, you'll have to be very sharp on this because we're...
You just reminded me, there was a quote that was on BBC News that I wanted to read out, which is probably why there isn't much accountability. It was on a BBC News article that I posted yesterday. I'm just looking for it now. I did have it, but it's gone off. 1 second. Here it is. This is what BBC reported in their article. The Hesley Group, owned by private equity firm Antin Infrastructure, which is better known for investing in gas line pipes, continues to run a school and placements for adults with learning disabilities, and says it cannot commit further because of the ongoing criminal investigation by South Yorkshire Police. Private equity firms now own more than a quarter of all children's home placements in England and Wales, according to analysis for BBC by Peter Morris, an expert researcher on such investments.
Thank you.
That even shocked me.
But yes, and actually, it explains a damn lot. It's an opportunity for profit, not an opportunity to care. Paul, does that answer the question, or are there other things?
I would say it's a societal priority issue. So since the 1980s, it's been all about the individual. It's not been about, and I'm not saying things didn't happen before then, but what is important to us as a society? For me, it's coming together, making sure everyone's all right and looking after each other. And that would mean that people in caring jobs, people in caring professions would be prioritised, would be well paid, would be well trained, would be well resourced. The problem that we have is that is not the case in the slightest. You have very, very long hours. We have people who are working really below minimum wage by the time they travel and things like that. A lot of the time when they're doing caring jobs, it's not well paid. It's not well resourced. They're underfunded. They're under-resourced, and this may lead to people who are not qualified well enough going into those jobs, or those who are qualified being far too overstretched. And then you might get the wrong type of people going into that, because why in the world would you go into that if you really cared about people and really worried about people? That must be an incredibly stressful thing to do, to try to look after people when you know that the funding isn't there. So the priorities of us as a people need to change towards being that more socially caring. I don't care how much money someone makes on the stock exchange and how much money someone invents that day by doing stock buybacks. I don't value that. That's a valueless thing to me. Helping someone who's had a hard time in life, helping someone to feel better, that is a priority, whether that's elderly people or young people or anyone in between. That should be the priority, and I think that's where we're going wrong.
Brilliant. Thank you for that comment. James Strange, how many lessons need to be learned? The damage that is being done to so many people is unforgivable. Jacqueline Hemmings mentions austerity and no funding as contributory factors. Thank you. Underpaid, overworked, and underappreciated. Spot on. Last question to Vonnie. One of the things the papers have picked on is the failure of the safeguarding procedures. What needs to be done to improve that?
I'll be honest, John. I read all of the thing and listening to you. I mean, I'm still quite emotional. I was trying to hold myself together there. Yeah, some of it is stark. The education secretary, her again, has launched a review into the LADO process to devise a handbook of best practice or something. I don't understand why that wasn't already there. I don't understand how so many instances could have been reported, and there's been a lack of communication identified in an investigation. There is a failure of safeguarding. I'm not sure why that's happened. I don't know. I don't know enough about it to understand all the ins and outs of the case to understand why that's happened. But when you read the information, and you research into it, why was there no communication? Why were these procedures not in place? This is not the first time that things like this have come to light.
Yeah.
I know when I do as a teacher, I do my safeguarding every year. And Paul will say the same. You know the same, John. You learn about all the things that have happened before. And you learn about. They tell you about the worst case things that have happened. I've had to whistleblow and report things. I've been a witness in a case with child abuse. a witness for the prosecution as a professional teacher as part of my role. Had to go to court and give evidence, which did result in a conviction. So that was good. The system worked in that case. But I just don't understand how it could be so lax, apart from, is it funding? Is it the fact that all of these people who are responsible for these roles have no time, no too much caseload? I don't understand. I think it definitely needs further investigation, but it looks like it was just a mess. It's a horrendous failure of safeguarding, to be honest.
I have a theory, Vonnie, that it's about when people's loyalties get confused. They're debate. Most people are basically decent, but they think that their job is to protect the institution, and sort of they think that the way to do that is to cover up the problems.
The job is to protect the children, John.
Not to drag them out, and sort of not protect the children, and sort of.
You've got to protect the children.
But the Lado's reports to senior police officers and senior managers. That's their role. Now, the police force is important because it's South Yorkshire Police, the same police force that refused to do anything about the Rotherham sex abuse scandal until that hit the media. And it's the same one. And our lessons being learned.
No, is the answer.
No.
Thank you. I'm going to move on. We could talk about this for another quarter of an hour, and thank you for your contributions. And can I apologise to listeners to the podcast and to people looking in for moving on? But we have one more question to do, and that's on the Ukraine, which has hit the news again. We're sending tanks to the Ukraine. Paul, one, is it a good thing or a terrifying escalation? And two, should we be fighting this war at all?
For me, I don't know. Is it a terrifying escalation, or is it appropriate? I'm not sure. I really don't understand how this has been reported. Like, there is so many strange, conflicting stories that come out about this. What I do know is there appears to be absolutely no desire on either side for peace. There doesn't seem to be any sort of like idea of what's the resolution here. And it's very strange because if you mention it as well in certain circles, they're like, oh, you must love Putin. If you want peace in Ukraine, we need to keep on going until Putin's gone. You're like, what are you talking about? What sort of bizarre behavior is this? Like, you're unlikely to dislodge Putin anyway. Like, that's not what's going to happen, as much as he's absolutely awful, even though the West lauded him for a little while. Tony Blair had him visit, he was in with the Queen and everything like that. So they've got an interesting past with this particular awful world leader. But I don't see any desire to move towards a peaceful resolution, and so what is this for? What is it for? Obviously, the people are the ones who are suffering. Do people want war? Do people want to sell some tanks? Is that what this is about, or is this about making sure that the world is stable? Because honestly, I can't really see that being articulated very well. It's like we've lost sight that even matters. We need to be starting to talk in general in the population about de-escalation, about making peace, about how that can happen, whether that's like because they want the complete withdrawal of Russia, or is there some sort of referendum that can go on in certain areas? Could that be a thing? But it doesn't appear that either side are interested in that. And it's never going to lead to peace if neither side really wanted. I'm sure the people of Ukraine don't want to be in a war zone, and I'm sure the people of Russia don't want to have their country attacking their neighbours, because a lot of them feel like family from each other across the border to each other. So these are just people separated by arbitrary lines on a map. It's not a real thing. That doesn't separate the people out. So I would like to hear a lot more about de-escalation in whatever form that takes. At least people having that opinion. but it seems to be this binary opinion
at the
right
end,
now.
if I get time, Paul, I'll come back to you at the end because we'll see. But I mean, Vonnie, when we were talking about questions before, you know, if you listen to the mainstream media and Boris Johnson, it's all kind of nationalism, and we're going to defeat the Ruskies, and we need to stop Putin. But when you sort of delve into the left wing social media, there's much more hostility towards it, and it's seen as American imperialism, as an opportunity, as Paul was mentioning, an opportunity by the big money men to make money, and sort of, this feeling that we're supporting a nasty regime in Ukraine anyway, and that Ukraine is being destroyed as a pawn to try and weaken Putin and Russia. And caught up in this big international power play, and there's so much hostility to it, and we just never hear about that. And the question is it sort of the same to you? Should we be fighting this war at all?
Well, an ideal utopia, absolutely not. But we're not in an ideal utopia. We're in a world where war is constructed to control us, to manipulate us, it's Orwellian. You know, I always think 1984, where they keep changing who they're at war with arbitrarily, and the daily hate, where you kind of, the media tells you that you should think these are the baddies and these are the goodies and all of that. That's pretty much what you can see is going on. Do you know? I feel for the people, like Paul said, it's the Ukrainian people, it's the Russian people. They are the victims of this. You know, every plane that gets flown, every missile that gets dropped, every bomb that goes off, every bit of weaponry that's made is putting money in someone's pocket. And for what? For all of those reasons, ideally, obviously, no. I'm absolutely anti-war. I'm completely pacifist. But I don't know where we go from here, because short of the world rising up and saying stop war, I mean, this is not just going on in Ukraine. That's just the one that's happening in Europe. What's been going on in Yemen for years? What's going on in Israel and Palestine? What's going on in sub-Saharan Africa, in Central America? What is you know, this is, war is a means of control and making money. It controls populations by getting them on sides, dividing them, and it makes money for people who want to be more rich, who want to be richer. That's kind of, it's a horrible thing. And when you look at the media, I kind of read it and I think there are no good guys or bad guys. There are no sides here. There is just corruption, oppression, manipulation, and people dying for other people's political agendas.
Thank you. That was brilliant. Paul, we need to clip that bit out. And the confusion about what's going on spoke to my heart. And then the bit at the end was so powerful. Neil, coming to what Bonnie was saying, stop the war is that we need to campaign for peace talks. But Paul was right. Nobody is interested in peace talk, least of all Putin. The only way that the West can stop this is by not sending weapons to Ukraine and letting Ukraine lose that war. And then that will bring it to an end. But there's no other way. And as long as we keep supplying weapons, this war will go on. What is your, I mean, you don't have a solution, I know, but sort of, I mean, talk about that for a while. And I mean, should we just stop sending weapons?
It's a tough one, is that? Because the reality is, I mean, as Vonnie said, there is no winners in this. There's only losers, with the exception of the military-industrial complex. And the reality is, I mean, let's not forget originally when Zelensky, who doesn't look as though he's suffered a day through this war, by the way, it's everyone else is suffering, not him, by the look of it. But anyway, when he first asked for tanks, everyone was like, "Oh no, that's a red line. No, we're not sending tanks." And then Britain, America, Germany, and others all said, "Okay, yeah, go on then. We'll send tanks. Yeah, we need to send tanks." And as soon as the documents were signed, say, "Yeah, we'll send tanks. We need warplanes now. We need long-range missiles. We need." When is it going to stop? When are his demands going to stop? I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, should we send weapons or not? I mean, the question I have is: are the Tory party still being funded by Russian oligarchs? Maybe that's one way we could.
Answer yes is the answer. Yeah, it was in the news today. Yes.
But one way we could stop it is by cutting off the supply of money and power from Putin. I mean, Jonathan Pye, when this war first started, the satiricist, however it's pronounced, the comedian, Jonathan Pye, made the point of that actually. What Putin has done is spent years using our own power against us, our own greed, our own want for more and more money against us, and to the point where when he went and invaded Crimea, we didn't do anything. And now the big issue that no one talks about in all this is NATO. NATO are the big aggressor in all this. They keep moving eastwards towards the Russian border, and that has aggravated Putin. But the problem is, we never hear of what it is that's bothering Putin. We are never going to get towards peace if we never hear the other side. We every night when Zelensky does his TV address, and by the way, he was an actor before he was a politician. He did the voice of Ted in the Ukrainian version of it, and he does his nightly address. But when did we last hear from Putin in his words? When did we last hear from that? Rather than just a summary of what he said and then it being dismissed. I mean, we can't make fair judgments unless we have all the information. And when we're only getting one side of the information, which we largely are in our media, it's propaganda. And that's all that we're getting at the moment. So, yes, there needs to be more calls for peace. Yes, I do agree with Stop the War, who have been right on everything else. I mean, Iraq, for example, they were completely right about that. So, who am I going to trust? Stop the war or a warmongering government? Which one am I going to trust?
Thank you. I'm just. I promised I'd come back to Paul. I mean, having heard. I mean, I have this worry. Jane puts a finger on the button here. If we let Putin take Ukraine, do we really think for a moment it'll stop there? So what do you do? Some lovely comments here. Jacqueline Hemmings, just thinking we're looking at it from a rational angle where peace is the sensible choice, but perhaps the people who are in the middle of it, they're just thinking about winning the war. And maybe that's how we felt during World War II. And sort of Mark Lungley looks at the escalation that Neil was talking about and sort of says, is it only going to stop when it comes to nuclear weapons, which is the worry, of course. Jane Strange is sure that war propaganda has been a useful tool for Putin to deflect attention from his attack on human rights organizations in Russia. I mean, there's that aspect of it. Last comment, Paul, and you've not got very long, I'm afraid, but what do you make of it all?
It's really big, but I think the problem it reflects what is going on in society in general, where you've got this binary where you've got to pick a side. I don't think that by wanting peace that I'm supporting Putin. I don't think that by referencing the fact that a Nazi supporting, platoon or whatever they were absorbed into the Ukrainian army. I don't think referencing that means that I am buying into Putin's propaganda. That is factually correct. That did happen. I don't think that when they liberated a city, their troops, Zeke Highland, I don't think pointing that out means that I would be pro-Putin. The problem we've got is we're just picking, we're just saying, Putin's the bad guy and Ukraine's the good guy. It's possible that they're both a bad guy here, and that the war is being driven by people who have interest in war. What we need to do is stop picking sides in that ridiculous manner of like, oh, let's see which side you want to win, like it's a football match or something like that. And we need to think, right, what is actually going on? Who is losing here? And it's always the people. It's not the powerful who miss out. It's not the powerful who have their lives ruined. It's the people, it's ordinary working class people who should be treating one another like brothers and sisters and siblings of all varieties. You know, that is what the goal needs to be. And until we change the conversation all the time in every aspect, we're just going to continue to lose, and we're just going to continue to have more war.
Thank you. Was it not brilliant tonight? Were these people not fantastic? I'll admit it. It was brilliant tonight. Thank you, Bonnie. It's a sort of brilliant tonight. Absolutely wonderful. Neil, it's always great to have you on, and your insights and your kind heart just shine through. Thanks so much. And Paul, the boss, as always, coming up with what we needed to hear at the end. So that's it from me, people. We've overrun a little bit, but it was worth it, wasn't it? And I'm now going to let Paul deliver his final messages. What's the name of that talk show that always ended up with the one they always used to end up fighting? Jerry Springer. Sort of this is Paul's Jerry Springer moment. He's going to give his final messages, and sort of then it's goodbye from all of us. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you to the people who commented for those fabulous comments. And over to you, Paul.
Join us on Socialist Think Tank. You can become a member by visiting socialistthinktank.com. Support our social media channels. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Knock together a playlist and listen to all of our podcasts and things like that. All these things help spread the word. Tell people about the things you've heard in this show, because actually this is not really necessarily meant to be about us telling you things. This is about giving you inspiration for some thoughts and some better ways to be able to address other people and try to convince them of what you already know to be true, because we've got a pretty intelligent audience, haven't we? But it's always difficult to get that message across. So please do that. Do treat each other like siblings. Do treat each other like we're part of the same humanity. Even your enemies. That's the difficult thing. That's where we go wrong, isn't it, all the time, though? Because our enemies treat us like enemies, and we treat our enemies like siblings. But that's what we need to do. We need to set a good example. And it is getting a bit Jerry Springer, isn't it? So thank you to everyone. Thank you especially...
Don't have nightmares.
Thank you especially to John for presenting, for Neil for being so candid in his own experiences. And that's one of the beauties of this show. We always get people who know what they're talking about and have personal lived experience of things. We try not to just talk around people. We try and get people, and that's huge, and that's what we don't see in mainstream media at all. And also to Vonnie for all the work she's done with the NAU. Support those striking colleagues tomorrow. Hopefully I'll be giving you a little bit from the picket line, because I've sneakily joined in with the action as well. Even though my union didn't reach the threshold, I've joined NAU as well, so I'm now a member of 2 education unions. So so
Happy
yeah,
to have Paul. So
I know you've been yeah, it's been a long time coming, hasn't it, Bonnie? And it's I've got some lovely NEU friends and colleagues, so yeah, it's nice to be part of that too. So yeah, come out and support us. Thanks to everyone, and we will see you all very soon, I hope. Take care.
Keep the red flag flying